Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So another year has finally come to an end, and all I gotta say is thank Christ, because 2024 has been maybe the single worst year I've experienced in recent memory. I know 2020 was a terrible year, but for me personally, last year was a lot, but I'm not here to talk about my personal problems. I'm here to talk to you guys about what I think are the best movies of that year, because it wasn't a spectacular year for movies, but there were certainly some movies that came out that I genuinely loved. There was nothing like Godzilla Minus One, where this was definitively the best movie of the year, but there were a lot of good ones, so let's talk about them. Now, if you're brand new to the channel, first of all, welcome. Thank you for watching this video, and if you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do so. But the thing I wanted to address is that normally on this channel, I always do my worst of the year list first, because I like to just get the negative stuff out of the way and try to end the year on a positive note. However, much like with last year, I didn't see enough bad movies to actually make a full-on bottom 10 list. But I will mention the movies that, had I made a bottom 10 list, these would easily be on it. The first movie is Argyle. This trailer played literally in front of every single movie that I saw since I first saw it. And the movie ended up being not just a spectacular disappointment, but an insulting one at that. It's just so stupid, it looks ugly, it wastes a very talented cast. The best thing I can say is that I no longer have to see that trailer for as long as I live. Last year may have been the worst year for comic book movies, and with the exception of Deadpool and Wolverine, every other movie that I have seen in that genre could easily land on this list. This includes the 1-2-3 punch of Madam Web, Venom the Last Dance, and Kraven the Hunter, as well as Joker Folie à Deux, which I think is the best of all four of those movies, and I actually like the ending of that movie more than most people. But it's just as pretentious as the first movie was, except this time, I'm no longer alone in thinking that, which brings me a little bit of joy. Red 1 was just a bloated, expensive vanity project for Dwayne Johnson, and was the movie that made me start to get tired of him. And that's a shame. And then what I think is the worst movie of the year, hands down, Borderlands. There is so much that is wrong with this movie, from the ugly look, the obnoxious characters, the awkward miscasting of Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, and Jamie Lee Curtis. But the reason why Borderlands is so bad is because we're in an era of video game adaptations, whether they be movies or TV shows, where they actually are starting to get good. We had Illumination's Super Mario Bros. Movie, which isn't perfect, but I think is a lot of fun. We have The Last of Us on HBO, which is fantastic, even if I've only seen 3 episodes. And I haven't seen Arcane on Netflix, but people are telling me that that's amazing as well. So all those projects are taking video game adaptations in the right step forward. Borderlands just took us several steps back, and honestly, makes me appreciate something like Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And in retrospect, Borderlands is made even worse because back in December, we had the best video game adaptation with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So there's no excuse for Borderlands to be as bad as it is. And considering Avi Arad is producing the Legend of Zelda movie for Sony, ooh boy, we're in trouble. But yeah, Borderlands, had I done a worst of the year list, this would have topped that. But let's move past all that. Let's talk about the movies that I actually think are good, because there have been a few good movies out there, and a couple of surprises. In fact, 2 surprises, actually. The first one up is Twisters. I enjoyed the first Twister, but it definitely wasn't perfect by any means. Twisters is much like Top Gun Maverick, where it is so much better than that previous film, and there's actually a lot in it that I really like. It's well shot, I really like the characters more than I did in the first movie. Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, Anthony Ramos are all great. This was a huge surprise, and I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. Another movie that I really liked that I didn't expect at all to like was Transformers 1. Based on those trailers, I was almost ready to put Transformers 1 on a worst of list because they looked so bad. but the actual movie itself, had I done a top 15, would have ended up on my best of list. You go into this movie thinking, oh, it's going to be the Orion Pax D16 buddy film. We get to see them as best friends before they become Optimus Prime and Megatron. But what we got was a movie about oppression of the lower class, a ruler who basically lies to the people he's serving, and how that can affect a friendship and people's viewpoints. Like, I did not expect this movie to turn out the way it did, and the result ended up being the best Transformers movie ever made. Some might say this movie is more than meets the eye, but I say it's got the touch, and it's got the power. Yeah. I can't even believe I went through that entire review without saying either of those two phrases, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Transformers 1. Had I done a top 15 list, this movie would have easily been in there. But what's on my top 10 list? Well, with enough beating around the bush, let's get this list started. Number 10. Saturday Night. I don't see this movie popping up on a lot of best of lists, but for me, I found this movie to be really entertaining. It has several moments that made me laugh out loud. Jason Reitman's direction is sporadic and fits perfectly with the type of story that's being told. The casting is not always flawless. There's some people that I'm like, yeah, you don't represent that SNL cast member. But some people, like Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd, just pitch perfect. And watching this movie was somewhat inspirational that, yeah, show business is going to get super chaotic, especially when you're launching something that nobody has ever done before. But with the right crew and a dedication to get this thing out, it could be accomplished. And 50 years later, for better and for worse, SNL is still kicking. And I think that this movie accomplished what it set out to do. Number 9. Abigail. Now, this is a movie that I know is not going to pop up on anybody's best of list. In fact, I might be the only person that has it, but it's a really fun movie from Radio Silence. It's pretty much Dracula's Daughter mixed in with Ready or Not. The kills are great. It's just as morbidly funny as Ready or Not is. The cast is fantastic, and it's just a lot of fun. This might not be a tearjerker of a movie, and it's certainly not gonna get any Oscars, but because this movie is such a blast from beginning to end, I had to put it on my best of list. Not as high as when I put Ready or Not on my best of 2019 list, but it's still a good time regardless. Number 8. Ultraman Rising. Had it not been for the positive word of mouth, I probably would have skipped this film entirely, but I'm glad I didn't, because this is right up there with Across the Spider-Verse and Mutant Mayhem. It is that good in terms of its art style, its action scenes, and its story is very heartfelt. It's basically a story about fatherhood and learning to grow up when taking care of a child. The action scenes are visually stunning. The voice cast is fantastic. All the characters go through their own personal arcs to the point where you even sympathize with the villain of the film. You don't approve what he's doing, but you see things from his perspective and go, yeah, I kind of get it. But again, you still root for the hero of the movie, which definitely pulls some inspiration from Tony Stark's arc in the first Iron Man, but it definitely has its own unique twist on this story. And the baby is adorable. She is cute, she gets her moments to shine, and when she does the Godzilla victory dance from Invasion of the Astro Monster, that got me. I was like, yes! If you haven't seen this movie, you need to check it out immediately, especially if you're a fan of Tokusatsu. And if there's some chance that they do a special screening of Ultraman Rising in theaters, I will gladly check it out, because this is a movie that deserved a big screen release. Number 7. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I didn't have high expectations going into this movie. Not that I thought it would be bad, but the last 3 movies were so good that this one had a lot to live up to. And while I think it's the weakest of these new Planet of the Apes movies, it's still really good. It has a great look to it. It takes place far enough from the Caesar trilogy that it can stand on its own, and yet it still ties into those last 3 movies because of how Caesar's legacy and his teachings have been warped by Proximus Caesar, who is a good villain even though he comes in very late in the movie. If there are any issues I had, I think the movie is way too long for its own good, and I found Freya Allan to be rather weak in the movie. But those are very minor complaints. The movie is still really good. I was engaged from beginning to end, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Number 6. Inside Out 2. Now this movie was originally higher on my best of list because I think it's a sequel that absolutely warrants its existence. It makes sense to follow up the first Inside Out movie with what happens here. I think the voice cast is still fantastic, and all the new characters, Ennui, Embarrassment, Envy, and especially Anxiety, are all really good, and the movie is smart enough to make Anxiety bad while not being a straight-up villain. And at the end of the movie, when it has its big statement on how all of your emotions play an important role in your life, that's really good. Like, this movie very much is classic Pixar. However, I do have a few reasons why this movie got bumped down a bit. The first is that it's very much a sequel. It's a good one, but it does follow a lot of the same trappings that the first movie had. It has similar beats. When you watch it, you go, hey, that was like the first one. But the main reason I bumped this movie down a bit is hearing all the stories about the animators getting underpaid and working longer hours to get the movie done was really uninspiring and disappointing. But despite my feelings about the work environment of this movie, the movie itself, the final product, ended up being much better than I could have ever imagined when it was first announced. Number 5. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Now, I'm on record in thinking that Mad Max Fury Road is overrated. It's really good, but I just didn't go gaga over it like so many people did when it came out. It's a jaw-dropping action movie to where I didn't find myself engaged in the characters as much as I would have liked to. Furiosa is that more character-driven movie. It's a prequel, obviously, but I just found myself more invested in what was going on with this story. The cast is fantastic. Chris Hemsworth is a great villain. Anya Taylor-Joy is really good as a younger Furiosa. The action scenes are still just as good as they were in the first movie, and George Miller's direction is really spot on. It's a shame that this movie flopped at the box office because I really think it's that good. I enjoy Fury Road. Just because I say that movie's overrated doesn't mean I dislike it. But when it comes to these last two Mad Max movies, I honestly prefer Furiosa, and that's that. Number 4. Hitman. Richard Linklater is one of my favorite directors working today, and he delivered another hit with Hitman. It's a great rom-com. Your two leads, Glen Powell and Andrea Arjona, are fantastic. Their chemistry is electric, and the movie has a lot of wickedly funny scenarios that can take a sinister turn, especially when we get to the end of the film. There's that thing that happens where I'm just like, wow, that went dark. But the rest of the movie is so entertaining and so well made. It's not my favorite of Richard Linklater's movies, but it definitely highlights some of the best aspects of his movies, especially when it comes to letting the two leads have some story input. So it's a great movie overall. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Number 3. The Wild Robot. This year has been an excellent year for animated films, and The Wild Robot is undeniably the best one. Between The Bad Guys, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and now The Wild Robot, DreamWorks is certainly giving Disney and Pixar a run for their money. This movie is visually stunning with its art style, the action scenes, the animation of all the characters. The voice cast is absolutely fantastic, and it'll pull on your heartstrings in the same way that How to Train Your Dragon did. This honestly might be in my top 3 of DreamWorks animated movies. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon and Shrek 2 are definitely up there, and I think this movie might surpass the first Shrek, but I don't know. I need some real time to think about that, but the fact that I'm debating whether or not this is better than the first Shrek is a testament to how great The Wild Robot actually is. Number 2. Wicked. Now, much like with Inside Out 2, where that movie was much higher on my list but got bumped down, Wicked was the opposite, where this movie was actually lower on my list, but the reason why it got bumped up to number 2 is because I kept thinking about the movie weeks after seeing it. There is just so much that is brilliant about this movie, from the visual look to it, the practical sets, the musical sequences. They're all done with perfection. This is movie-making magic at its finest. And the cast is also fantastic, from Jonathan Bailey, Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh, Jeff Goldblum. But it's Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande that are the highlights of this film. Both actresses are fantastic in their respective roles, and the story itself is very well told and very timely with the circumstances that are going on in the world right now. I felt a lot watching this movie, and a lot of that came from the enthusiasm of the audience I saw it with, which were all Wicked fans. And when it ended with "To Be Continued," I knew that this would end up on my best of the year list, but I didn't know that over time it would grow up to be number 2 on this list. So it is great, and I cannot wait to see Wicked for good this year. Now, what could possibly be my number 1 film? Well, if I'm going to be totally honest, there was a part of me that wanted to put Godzilla -1 minus color in that slot, because it technically was released in 2024. Yes, it's the same movie but in black and white, but it got a theatrical release in Japan and the United States in 2024. But like I said, it's technically the same movie from 2023, but minus color. So what was the actual number 1 movie? Well, here it is. Number 1. Anora. This movie got fantastic word of mouth from the Cannes Film Festival. It won the Palme d'Or. It's been deemed as one of the best, if not the best film of the year by several critics. And mainly because of the Cannes Film Festival, there was part of me that was kind of actively fighting against this movie before I saw it. Not that the Cannes Film Festival is bad, because it's the most high-profile film festival in the world, but the last movie I saw that won the Palme d'Or, Titane, I thought was dreadful. It was actually on my worst of list the year that came out. And I'm happy to say that Anora is absolutely fantastic. The last thing I ever expected to happen was this movie ending up as my number 1 pick for the year. It's very well shot. Sean Baker's direction is great. Mikey Madison is giving the performance of her career, and I think she is a definite shoo-in for Best Actress. It's really funny. There are a lot of scenes in this movie that made me laugh hard, and scenes that I honestly didn't expect from a movie like this. The rest of the characters are great, and the end of the movie is very heartfelt, yet also very sad. I actually spent several days thinking about that ending and how, yeah, this character has come around to what she had to deal with this rich Russian kid, but at the same time, she kind of feels very sad in her position. And you have this bodyguard who, in a lesser movie, would have been a nothing character, but he's pretty much there to comfort her. He's the one that treats her with respect and is kind to her. So it's a very human story, a very well done movie. It definitely can get graphic at points. I mean, Mikey Madison does get naked in this film, and there's that one scene where she's dancing in the living room that, man, she's really dedicated to that scene, but I imagine is very explicit for a lot of people. So this movie's not for everyone, but if you can get past like the sex, the nudity, then you'll be treated to a very human story with some really funny moments, but mostly heartfelt moments. And for me, that's why Anora, of all movies, ended up being my favorite movie of 2024. And there you go. Those are my picks for my 10 favorite movies of 2024. I hope you enjoyed it, and I want to apologize again for not making a worst of list this year. But between not having seen enough bad movies and last year just being an absolute shit show, I didn't feel a need to make another worst of list, but maybe I'll do one for 2025, and if nothing else, I will absolutely be doing a worst of the decade list once we reach the end of this decade, because there's a lot of movies that need a good talking to. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I want to give a special thank you to all of my subscribers and YouTube members right over here. You guys help make this channel what it is, and if you'd like to become a YouTube member and get access to perks that nobody else gets, you could do so for as little as $1.99 a month. But until next time, I want to hear from you guys what your favorite movies of 2024 were. Whatever they may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. If you want to find me elsewhere on the internet, you can do so via these social media platforms and my theme park and travel channel right here on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.